This is the easier-to-read version of Animal Farm by George Orwell, retold and narrated by Sarah Simpson. Chapter 6. All that year, the animals worked like slaves. They were happy anyway. Even if the work was hard and they were hungry, they were free. At least they weren't being controlled by a bunch of lazy humans anymore. Napoleon was in charge, and he was an animal, like them. He had to be looking out for them, right? During the spring and summer, the animals worked 60 hours a week, but they still got Sundays off. In August, Napoleon told the animals that they should work on Sunday, too. The animals didn't have to work on Sunday. They could choose to take the day off. However, any animal who took Sundays off would only get half the amount of food. Since they were already starving, losing half of their food for the week would have killed them. Everybody chose to work. Even with all the extra hours of work, the animals couldn't get everything done that was necessary to keep the farm running successfully. The windmill took almost all of their time. As a result, they weren't able to plant enough food to eat. There would be even less to eat than there already was. Everything about building the windmill was harder than they expected it to be. They had all the supplies they needed: limestone to dig up to turn into bricks, cement for gluing them together, sand for mixing with the cement, but they didn't have the tools or the knowledge to use them effectively. For example, the tools on the farm were designed to be used by human beings who could walk on 2 legs, not by animals who walked on 4 legs and didn't have fingers or thumbs. The animals could dig up big pieces of limestone out of the ground. That wasn't the problem. The hard part was finding a way to break the big pieces into bricks that could be used for building. They finally solved the problem by using gravity to break up the limestone. The animals would use ropes to pull the big limestone rocks up to the top of a hill. They would push the big rocks off the side of the hill, and they would crash down at the bottom, breaking into smaller pieces. The small pieces could be dragged to the hill where they were building the windmill and used to make the walls. It was slow, hard work. All of the animals worked to break up the rock. Well, except for the pigs. The pigs didn't help haul the rocks. They just watched everyone else work and told them what to do. Boxer worked the hardest of anyone. Whenever there was a big rock to move, Boxer was there helping. He got up 45 minutes earlier than everyone else in the morning so he could work. Boxer was getting older, and the work was hard on his body. Clover told him to be careful. She told him not to work so hard. She told him he needed to take better care of himself. Boxer didn't listen. Whenever Clover tried to talk to him, he would just say, "I will work harder," and "Napoleon is always right." During the summer, the animals mostly had enough to eat. Not having to feed 5 greedy humans made the food last much longer. Animals were able to do many jobs more easily than humans could. For example, the goats could eat the weeds out of the garden more quickly than human beings could pull them. Now that the animals didn't steal, they didn't need fences and gates. That made many jobs easier. After a while, even though the animals were working hard, they discovered that there were some items they needed that they couldn't produce themselves on the farm. They needed oil for the lamps that lit their stalls. They needed nails for building. They needed dog biscuits for the dogs. They needed iron for horseshoes. They needed seeds and fertilizer. They needed tools for building the windmill. The animals were worried. They didn't know how they would get the things they needed. One Sunday, Napoleon told the animals that they would have to start trading with humans outside the farm to get the things they needed. The animals were upset. One of the first commandments they agreed on after the rebellion was that they wouldn't do business with humans. Napoleon told them that they had to trade with humans or they wouldn't be able to finish the windmill. The windmill was the most important thing. Napoleon said they would sell some of the hay crop. If they needed more money, they would sell the hens' eggs. Napoleon said the hens should be happy to make this sacrifice as their special contribution toward the building of the windmill. The animals thought they had agreed that they wouldn't use money. They thought they had agreed they wouldn't trade with humans. However, it was getting harder and harder to remember how things were in the beginning. When a few animals started to talk about their concerns, the dogs growled and the sheep started to bleat, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, until they stopped asking questions. Napoleon said he had figured out all the details already. There was a man named Mr. Whymper who lived in town. He had been hired to coordinate business between the animals and the humans. Mr. Whymper would come to meet with Napoleon every Monday. After the meeting, Squealer and the dogs came to the barn to explain things to the animals in a way that they could understand. Squealer told them that they didn't remember the commandments correctly. There had never been a rule about not trading with humans. There had never been a rule about not using money. Squealer told the animals they had only imagined these rules, that they had never existed. Most of the animals didn't know how to read, so they didn't think about going into the barn to read the commandments painted on the wall. If they had, they would have known that Squealer was lying. Instead, they just believed what he told them. Mr. Whymper came to the farm every Monday. He was a sneaky-looking little man. He only had a small business in town, but he was the only person smart enough to see that he could make money doing business with the animals. The animals hated it when Mr. Whymper came to the farm, but it felt good to see Napoleon, an animal with 4 legs, giving orders to a human. The humans still hated Animal Farm. In town, the humans talked about how the windmill was going to fail. However, the humans couldn't help but feel some respect for the animals and everything they had accomplished. The humans had begun to call Animal Farm by its proper name and ceased to pretend that it was called Manor Farm. The humans had stopped standing up for Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones moved away and didn't talk about getting his farm back anymore. There were rumors going around that Napoleon was going to make a deal with either Mr. Pilkington of Foxwood Farm or Mr. Frederick of Pinchfield Farm, but nobody was sure which rumor was true. One week they heard that Napoleon was making a deal with Mr. Pilkington, the next week they heard it was Mr. Frederick. Around this time, the pigs moved out of the barn and into the farmhouse. The animals were upset. They thought they remembered a rule that said the animals would never live in the farmhouse. They thought they remembered that they all agreed that the farmhouse would be left alone to serve as a museum to teach future generations about the evils of humans. Once again, Squealer came to explain things to the animals in a way that they could understand. Squealer told the animals the pigs needed to live in the farmhouse. The pigs were the brains of the farm and needed a quiet place to do their work. Squealer had started to call Napoleon leader instead of comrade. Squealer said that the leader deserved a nice house because he was in charge. The animals heard that the pigs were eating their meals at a table and were sleeping in beds. Clover thought she remembered a rule that said the animals would not sleep in beds, but she couldn't read the commandments to be sure. Clover went and got Muriel the goat to help her. Muriel could read a little. "Muriel, would you read me the 4th commandment?" Clover asked. It took her a few minutes, but Muriel was able to read it. It says, "No animal will sleep in a bed with sheets," Muriel said. Clover didn't remember anything about sheets, but if that's what it said on the wall, it had to be right. A smarter animal would have been able to figure out that the pigs had added with sheets later on to justify sleeping in the beds in the farmhouse. Squealer came into the barn to explain things to Clover. "I know you've heard that we pigs are sleeping in beds in the farmhouse," Squealer said. "There was never a rule that said we shouldn't sleep in beds. A bed is just a place to sleep. Using that definition, a pile of straw is a bed, a nest is a bed. The rule was that we wouldn't use sheets. As long as the bed doesn't have sheets, it doesn't break the rule. It's important that we pigs get enough sleep. Remember, comrades, that we need to sleep so our brains can work. Without the pigs running the farm, Mr. Jones would come back. Comrades, do you want Mr. Jones to come back?" The animals did not want Mr. Jones to come back. If the pigs needed to sleep in beds to keep Mr. Jones from coming back, that's what they should do. The animals didn't say anything else about the beds. The pigs started sleeping in for an extra hour every morning. The animals didn't say anything about that either. By fall, the animals were very tired, but they were happy. It had been a hard year. They sold part of the hay crop to buy things they needed for the farm. This meant they didn't have as much food in storage to get through the winter as they would have liked, but they had made so much progress on the windmill that they didn't mind. The windmill was halfway done, and the animals felt proud. Seeing how much they had accomplished motivated the animals to work even harder on the windmill. Only old Benjamin the donkey didn't feel excited about the windmill. Whenever anyone asked Benjamin about the windmill, he wouldn't say anything except, "Donkeys live a long time." Benjamin had seen a lot of big ideas come and go, and he knew better than to think any of them would change the lives of most of the animals for the better. One night in November, there was a terrible storm. The wind blew so hard that the animals felt the building shaking. The next morning, the animals went outside. A big tree had been pulled out of the ground by the strong winds. They looked up the hill and saw something terrible. The windmill was gone. All that was left was a pile of broken rocks. All their work was ruined. The animals were too sad to say anything. Napoleon walked back and forth in front of the pile of rocks. He stopped and looked at the other animals. "Comrades," Napoleon said, "do you know who tore down the windmill? Because I do. It was Snowball. Snowball came here in the middle of the night and knocked down the windmill because he was angry that we made him leave the farm. Comrades, here and now, I pronounce the death sentence on Snowball. I am offering a reward to anyone who can catch him. If you bring me his dead body, I will give you half a basket of apples. If you bring him to me alive, I'll give you a full basket of apples. I will also give you the award of Animal Hero Second Class for your bravery." The animals were shocked. They didn't believe that anyone, even Snowball, would do something as cruel as tearing down the windmill. They thought about all the ways they would hurt Snowball if they found him. They weren't thinking about the windmill anymore. Napoleon said that Snowball was probably staying on Foxwood Farm with Mr. Pilkington. "We have to rebuild the windmill," Napoleon shouted. "We can't let Snowball think he's beaten us. We'll work all winter, no matter how cold it is. We won't give Snowball the satisfaction of slowing us down. We will finish the windmill on time, comrades. Long live the windmill! Long live Animal Farm!"